Hello, this is Joseph Mattera. I'm so excited that my latest book, The Jesus Principles, has come out already. October 1st, 2019, published by Charisma Life. And you could purchase it through Kindle or through a printed copy on my website, josephmattera.org, or through Amazon. Today we're in part 9 of The Jesus Principles. This book is all about how Jesus released greatness in people. It has to do with leading a life that even death can't stop. And the first part, we dealt with how he processed his disciples. God wants the church to go from being event-driven to process-driven. He said, follow me and I'll make you to become fishers of men. Part 2, we dealt with how he saw what they were to be in the future. He told them they would be fishers of men. If we're going to make disciples, we have to have a sense of where God is taking people, speak it into their life, prophesy it over them, and affirm them in it constantly. The third part, we talked about how he changed their identity. Simon became Peter. He was able to build a church upon a person who was a cussing, unstable fisherman because he knew how to release greatness in people. He changed his identity the way he did with Abram and Sarai when he called them the father of many nations and the mother of many nations. We find that in Genesis 17. The fourth part, we dealt with how he was personable with them. We see John leaning on his bosom. He was affectionate. He liked them. He didn't just love them. Number 5, he modeled leadership. Acts chapter 1 says Jesus was able to do and teach. He didn't just teach and he didn't just do. He was able to model leadership. Number 6, we see how he properly placed his disciples when he only chose 12 to become apostles. He wasn't being a politician or a diplomat trying to please everybody. He never put somebody in a lane that they didn't belong in. He properly placed those that worked with him. Number 7, he shared his power. It says in chapter 9 of Luke that he gave them power and authority over all demons and to cure diseases. And so he didn't just give them a title, but he gave them the power to walk out the title. They had to have the capacity to follow him. Number 8, he delegated responsibility. The key to a movement is the distribution of labor. And he understood that better than anybody. And so he gave them power and authority over all demons. He sent them out to preach so that he didn't become the bottleneck of his own movement. If you don't delegate, if you don't empower other people to do what God has called us to do collectively, then you're going to limit the capacity that God has for the church or for your business or for any entity that you oversee. Number 9 is what we're going to deal with today, and that is he had purposeful friendships. He didn't just have friendships that evolved around socializing. Sometimes we waste our time just at having meaningless conversations with people and having friends that do nothing but basically talk about sports, and it never gets beyond that. But Jesus had purposeful friendships. It's the same model that Paul had when he told Timothy that what he heard from Paul in the presence of many witnesses, he was to entrust to faithful men who were able to teach others. In other words, he was telling Timothy, he was advising Timothy, spend the bulk of your time with people who are faithful, who have ability, and who can communicate the gospel. That is to say, they're able to reproduce themselves by teaching others. And so if they just had faithfulness but didn't have ability, don't prioritize your time with them. If they were people of ability but they weren't faithful, don't prioritize your time with them. But prioritize your time with those people who fit that threefold criteria. So Jesus chose people as his friends that he was building his kingdom with. All his friendships were purposeful. They were not meaningless. They weren't just centered around having fun and laughing together or just having, a meal together. And so he chose people that had potential. God is not into egalitarianism. That is to say, even though he loves everybody equally, he doesn't equally prioritize his gifts and abilities in everybody. Everybody is called differently. And those that he chooses to be disciplers, those he chooses to be pastors or shepherds or in any of the fivefold ministries, he's commanding them to prioritize their time with those who can communicate the gospel to others, those with capacity to lead and those who have proven themselves to be faithful. And so Jesus didn't hang out with the Pharisees. We're called to love everybody. We don't have to like everybody. He didn't socialize with the Pharisees and Sadducees. He spent the bulk of his time with those that were called to work with him as his disciples. So I pray that you learn how to prioritize your time. I pray that your friendships become meaningful and that you jettison those friendships that drain you, that waste your time. And I'm not talking about your spouse or your children. And I'm not talking about not ministering to people who are not called to be great leaders. We minister to everybody. But in terms of prioritizing our time, spending the bulk of our time, we have to do that with those who are going to multiply the gospel and make other disciples. If they're not willing to make disciples, then move on and spend the bulk of your times with those who are willing to make disciples. So next week, we're going to talk about team ministry. I pray you join us for part 10. Again, this is Joseph Mattera. I'm signing off. You could purchase this book, The Jesus Principles, on my website, Joseph Mattera. It's 2 T's, Mattera.org, or on Amazon. It's also available on Kindle. I'll see you the next time for part 10. God bless you.